Welcome to the final part of our The One Ring series, everyone. The discussion in this episode is top-notch, and we even go a bit deeper into how you can work around and with the canon story within existing properties like The Lord of the Rings. I thought it was really fascinating, the places we went this discussion.
Definitely.
But before we get to the episode, here's what is coming up in our call to action after the show.
After the episode, join us for our final thoughts about the series. We'll also go over our standard asking for reviews as well as supporting our Patreon. We'll have a sneak peek of another bonus episode coming in our Patreon relatively soon. Ryan has an announcement for some upcoming bonus content headed to the One Shot Network's secret archive. We do need help in order to cover some of the costs of the show, so you can support us over at patreon.com/charactercreationcast. If you want to check out what we have in our little archive over there, we've got all kinds of little goodies. So you can head over there while you're listening. You can sign up for things and listen to a podcast at the same time. That's the beauty of smartphones. It's so great. The things that you can do in the year of our Lord 2022. So we're about a third of a way to our goal for each month. So every little bit helps. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoy. Welcome back to our discussion episode. Last time we finished our session 0 for The One Ring. This episode, we will be discussing the character creation process. We are excited to welcome back Stef Midlock and James Pierson. Do you want to reintroduce yourselves for everybody and tell us a little bit about the characters you made?
Hello, I'm Stef Midlock. Thank you for having me. I'm from the Athrabeth Podcast. And last time on Character Creation Cast, I made a Hobbit of the Shire named Gilly Goodbody. She, her pronouns, please. And she is a treasure hunter is my calling. And, I didn't ever say my age. I'm about 40, which is sort of like a good, just adult hobbit. And I am keen-eyed, inquisitive, and a little bit of a burglar. So, she's a little bit scrappy. And let's see, I'm very hardy. I've got a short sword, and I also have a wind-proofed lantern. So stay out of my way, because I'm going to see you no matter what. And that's Gilly. I don't know.
Amazing.
Sorry, everyone. Sorry.
No, it's great. It was perfect.
Oh, boy.
All right, James, how about yourself?
Hi there, I'm James Pierson. I edit the Athrabeth Podcast, and I also have GM'd a couple of sessions of the One Ring RPG as bonus episodes on that podcast. And the character that I created last time is Drifa, daughter of Gisla. She uses she, her pronouns. She's a dwarf of Durin's folk, and her calling is champion. And basically, she's a pretty much straightforward, warrior. Not a lot of nuance to her. As one of the aspects of her calling, she has enemy lore trolls, which I think denotes in her background that prior to joining the party, she was part of the dwarven tunnel clearing crew that went into tunnels that were kind of, hadn't been used in a while or were maybe being expanded into, and was part of the team that went in there, fought the trolls, kicked them out of their holes so that dwarves could move in. And so she's got a hatred for trolls. She's pretty much not a big thinker, pretty much just a big fighter. And she is best friends with our party's elf person, who I'm sure we'll get into later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, speaking of, Ryan.
Yeah.
Tell us about your character.
So I've got Laura Lynn, she, her pronouns, an elf of Linden. She's 147 years old. and on the warden calling, wanting to protect the people of this world from the coming shadow that she's kind of been figuring out has been getting more and more prominent as time goes on. She has a focus on healing and on singing, songwriting, and playing musical instruments and making people happy. She's got a very merry personality, and she likes to spread that mirth whenever she can. Of course, she also has a secret crush on Drifa, the daughter of Gisela, because the muscles, as well as the muscles. But she keeps it secret because like her whole life, she's like in the society where they butt heads against the dwarves, the elves and the dwarves. And she doesn't think that sort of relationship would work too well in this world, unfortunately, but she can't help her heart feeling what her heart feels. So it is what it is. So Amelia, tell us about Knob.
Yes, my character is Knob Heathertoes. Knob, I think, is probably, let's say, a 31-year-old who still lives with his mom. My calling is messenger, and I imagine that started out as like running to the grocery store and then just kind of getting swept up in things along the way. I think his parents own an inn and he kind of works there and just refuses to move out. It's just like not he's smart but not strong, and he's just like kind of doing his thing. He's very happy to just stay where he's at, does not have any desire to go anywhere or do anything. But unfortunately, I don't think that's how this game works. So we're going to see how this goes for poor Knob. I'm guessing not well.
Did we get an age for Drifa?
Oh, I don't think I said. Yeah, so I think Drifa so dwarves typically live a little over, like probably over 100 years. I think Drifa is on the younger side. I think she's probably like 40. She's, a young adult dwarf.
Wow.
Love it.
We've got some well-seasoned folks in our group too, which is interesting. The youngest is what, 37? Is that what 31. I heard? 31? Yeah, that's not super young, at least. Nope. We've all seen some things. Mm-hmm. I can't wait for fanfic to see what sort of shenanigans. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's gonna be great.
Well, before we get there, we have to go ahead and dive right into a segment that we're calling D20 for your thoughts.
D20 for your thoughts?
A segment that Ryan calls D20 for your thoughts.
Such a great title. I love it.
The royal we good. Whenever I say that.
So in this segment, we like to talk to our guests about their thoughts on character creation process, how it relates to this system, to other games. First, we always ask the most cliche question in all of RPG podcasting. How did you get into RPGs?
Sure. I can go first. So it was the year of our Lord 1998, and this is how I met James, which is so cool. We started gaming with a couple of friends in our friend's living room, with, I believe, Vampire the Masquerade was my first ever, whatever that means. And I played a gangrel and it was great. And I had no idea what was going on the entire time. I kept thinking like, when does the board come out?
Amazing.
But I was too scared to ask because I was in high school and I was a freshman and I was scared of boys. So I never asked. I still am wondering when the board is coming out.
It's called the battle map.
Oh, heck yeah. It's only if you play with a grid. What about you, James?
Yeah, I mean, how I got into gaming is pretty much the same story. I think I maybe was into gaming a couple months before Steph was, but again, through our friend, mutual friend, we've started out playing Vampire the Masquerade. And actually, this was also how I met and became friends with Jude, Steph's co-host on Athrabeth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, we started out playing, I started out as a player playing Vampire the Masquerade. And then, we started to branch out into other games. And I found the first game that I ever GM'd successfully was Call of Cthulhu. And I sort of got into it from that aspect. And, quickly found out that I preferred being a GM to a player. But, that was quite a long time ago.
I've heard that you're very good at running horror games.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
He is. He's very spooky. It's very spooky. We have a couple of actual play One Ring episodes on Athrabeth, which they're sort of spooky and sort of just silly. We call them spoopy. There's one from October of 2020 and October 2021 that James has run if you want to check out his spooky gaming. I think you do a really good job of it. And this year we're going to finish it. It's like a 3-parter. So it'll be the exciting conclusion just a few months away.
It's a very slow burn.
Oh, that's exciting. I think I just realized how much I crave a good horror RPG session, and I haven't really been in one for ages. I think my last experience was Beyond the Supernatural back in the 90s for Palladium.
Oh, wow.
And
oh, man.
Even then,
I don't think I've ever gotten to do one.
Yeah. Oh, James, you gotta run one for them.
Hey, anytime.
Please.
I'm inviting us along.
Yes.
There we go.
Do it.
Well, what do you two look for in a system as far as character creation goes? Like, what sort of pieces need to be there for great characters to happen for you?
So as I said, I tend to GM, and I tend to prefer GMing to playing. So in a lot of, for me, in a lot of ways, I don't intersect necessarily with the character creation process, because typically when I make NPCs, I don't build them out as full character sheeted characters.
Yeah.
But I know that from my personal, like the way that I personally like to play games, I like character creation systems that have a lot of flexibility, because I like that, I like seeing my players really inspired and coming up with unique, really interesting characters, rather than sort of, limited or set characters that you sort of get out of other systems like D&D, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I like systems that invite you to create like well-rounded characters when it comes to like vices and backgrounds and stuff, because that just is so much of because it can, as you know, like launch you even on session 1, right? Or session 0, you already sort of know who you are if that's part of character creation. And so I really enjoy that. Like, one of my favorite character creations to do is in Legends of the Five Rings, because they ask you so many cool pointed questions, and I feel like you end up with like a really rich character right off the get-go. And so I think those pieces that like where it's not just about like, hey, I'm really great at these skills, but like, ooh, I'm also like, I've got these vices and I've got my inner conflict goes against like what I'm supposed to be doing on the surface. I love that stuff. It's so great. So yeah, anything that promotes that is perfect.
I feel like that always gives GMs a lot of hooks to pull on too, like anything that has all of those like story beats. And I feel like is always a really good indicator to a GM of like, these are the things that I'm interested in. Like, please take these things and make them come up in the game. Yeah. I always feel like flaws are where characters start to really come together for me. When they don't have flaws, I feel very one-dimensional.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So we like to look at character sheets because I think they can tell us kind of a lot about what playing a game is going to be like, what things are important. So what kind of story do you think that these character sheets tell us? Like, when you're just sitting down to make a character, like what kind of vibe do you get there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like off the get-go, this is not a super like detailed character sheet, right? It's not it doesn't ask too much of players. So I think like from that standpoint, it's really good in that it's not too scary, I think, for like newer players to jump into this character creation process. The sheet itself, we talked about this a little bit in the first section, but the writers were very deliberate in like the words, the vocabulary words that they chose to follow along with what J.R.R. Tolkien would have written himself if he was writing a character sheet. Right. So it fits, it feels very in-world. This feels to me like an in-world document, which I really like. And I think like, I think in a way I almost wish there were like more things to add. But maybe that's okay because that stuff comes later and you add that later. I don't know. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I think that the layout of the character sheet is really interesting too. Like if you look at it, it's divided into essentially 3 main columns with like your attribute at the top and then the skills that flow from that attribute below it. And so, I mean, it really calls everything back to the core mechanics of rolling against the target number that's set by your attribute. So like everything that flows underneath strength, for instance, you're going to roll against your strength target number. So it's very like well organized, although I don't know if I necessarily agree how some of these skills, like the attribute some of these skills fall under. I don't know if that necessarily makes sense, but I think that it's laid out in a very, like it all drives back to that core mechanic.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting how it is. It's easy to read. The thing that stood out to me the most was the design of the sheet. Right, like you've got the Elvish script at the top of the sheet, and you've got some like nice natural like leafy looking things at the bottom, and it's very evocative of like you're playing in this very fantastical world, and like it feels historical, right? Like you're playing in a historical setting. Which is really interesting.
We talked about that with like the book too, that like the art and that kind of stuff in the book feels very evocative and very reminiscent of the original like source material. And I feel like the character sheet design goes along with that pretty well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, we talked about too that this is such a known like world for all of us. So like it would be hard to find anyone who doesn't know what it is, right? And so even if this is a new game to you, this feels familiar, right? Like Ryan said, with the Tengwar text, the Elvish up at the top, and even the font of like the One Ring, it looks so much like what we know from Pete Jackson's movies. And so I think there's something that I think that's nice, and it's kind of disarming. Like it's like, okay, I know, all right, okay. I got this.
Yeah, it's familiar, right?
I will say that, like, when I first sat down to look at it, like, there's a lot of boxes. I mean, and it turns out that, like, most of them are, like, just boxes that you kind of tick and, like, tally marks and, whatever. But it does look a little bit like it. I was like, oh, boy. But having gone through it now, it's like, oh, okay, it's very clear what goes where. And, which is something that I always look for, because sometimes you sit down to play a game and you're like, the book is like, so here's this derived stat. And you're like, cool, but like, where does it go? It's like, there's not a box for that. And so we didn't have any of that. It was very clear where everything goes, and it does kind of flow in the order of creation and stuff too.
Yeah, I think that's actually something that they did a better job of on the fillable PDF than on the character sheet that's in the book, because the fillable PDF had your derived stats sort of like right with your attributes and stuff like that. And here, oh, actually, no, I take that back. It's all laid out pretty well here. This sidebar, though, that has like your adventure points, skill points, current endurance and stuff like that, it kind of forces you to go back and forth across the sheet. I like having your current values near your max values to make everything really like simplified, which is something I think they did on the fillable PDF that they didn't do on this sheet. That makes it just a little bit busier and a little harder to use.
I didn't look, like now that you mentioned it, like looking at like what things go, like what skills go with what, like why does battle go with heart and craft goes with strength?
Yeah.
That bothers me.
Or song with strength.
Right.
Yeah, like why is song with strength? Like
it's interesting. Like
I don't think I would put that there.
Maybe strength of presence versus strength of body, or whatever, something like that.
I just feel like song should go with heart, maybe. Okay, now that you mentioned it, it's going to bother me. But all right, that's fine.
Yeah, I wonder if like song is like the, I don't know, like almost like a fortification. Like it gives you an emotional strength after you hear a rousing song.
It's actually just all that like breath work that you have to do.
Yep.
Right.
The breath work. Yep.
You gotta hold that note.
muscle memory.
That these are, yeah, right, exactly. I think that looking at the descriptions of these in the book are quite helpful because I think yeah, they don't.
I think there's more
exactly
to
like
it.
jump off the page. Yeah,
that's fair.
Plus, I mean, mechanically, you have to think. Well, we're doing 6, 6, and 6, right? So if you moved all the things that made sense under heart, that makes sense to go under heart, you might have 8, 9 skills there. And now,
and then those would be uneven numbers, and that might be even worse. You're right.
Exactly. But then, like, okay, well, if I put all my points into heart, then I can power game a bit because now I'm good at 9 things as opposed to 4.
That's true.
True.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I see what you're saying.
I'll
allow it.
I looked up the song skill in the book, and they specifically call out that it's a strength skill because you have to have a clear singing voice.
Oh my gosh. Jeez Louise.
You do have to work at that. My youngest sibling is a singer, and you have to you have to work at that.
Yeah,
that's true.
You need a strong core.
Condition your body. Yep. There you go. Get those calluses on your fingers for the lyre.
And you got to be silent the whole day before you have to do it, and drink your lemon water or whatever. Yep. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
Maybe they're just making a big show of it, and it's really not that big of a deal. Maybe they're just being dramatic because that seems like a thing they would do. But
there you go.
You never know.
Well, how do we think character creation in the One Ring stacks up to other systems that we've played and created characters for?
Good question.
I feel like it was there was enough options happening that I had enough choices to make, but it was always contained. So there was no analysis paralysis or sort of that paralyzing, feeling of too many options in front of me. There was never more than 6 to 10 things or whatever to pick from.
Yeah.
Which I really like. So there was enough there to feel like there was variety, but not so much that I was I don't even know where to start.
Yeah. I do like that that most of the things that have options, there's 6 options. So really, if you wanted to go through and just roll a random character, you just roll a bunch of D6s and call it a day. And most of your character is defined at that point, right? Then you have a few choices. You have a few skills to figure out, hey, is this a skill that I favor or not? And then you're good from there. I both love that and felt like it was a little too on rails for my taste. I still liked the character creation system here, and I feel like we created great characters that we fleshed out pretty well. But if somebody makes the same choices as me, it's practically the same person at that point, because there's not too much deviation between an Elf of Linden and a Warden, between who's who, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think so that sort of asks the player, it asks more of the player, right?
Yeah.
To then define yourself further, to differentiate yourself. If we're both wardens, okay, then how am I going to do that as an elf versus how would a hobbit be a warden, right?
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
Still better than D&D though, in my opinion. Because D&D, if you're a paladin, you're a paladin.
Right.
Period. And your racial choice has very little to do with that. And you have to introduce a lot in D&D to create a unique character from that.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of it is unwritten, non-mechanical stuff, which is always my problem with that game.
Right.
People are like, check out this cool thing I'm doing. And I'm like, but that's you. That's not, the game doesn't do that for you.
Yeah.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
This feels like taking that background portion of D&D and blowing it up to something that's more meaningful, right? And then you've got the other stuff that is also meaningful on the other side of the coin for what you can do, quote unquote. And so kind of mushing those together, it's simple, which I like. It's easy to create a character, but there's just something a little more to nudge it in that direction. I think would be great, but then you're making it more complex at the same time. So I'm like, well, there's a trade-off somewhere.
Right. there's somewhere between like ease and simplicity and like that, depth that you're looking for. And it's a fine balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that, to use D&D as an example, your race only provides a little bit of context and the majority of your character is derived from your class. Here, they kind of flipped the script. The majority of our character was defined through our culture. And then your calling, which I think is the closest thing you could equate to a class, only gives you a couple of extra skills and one more feature, which I think makes sense for the setting, because a lot of the aspects of the character come from the culture they come from rather than the job that they do or the reason they're out adventuring. But it also sort of feels a little bit like, let's do it this way to differentiate ourselves from D&D. I'm sure that's not the decision, why they made that decision, but it feels like we essentially have two, one thing that's heavier and one thing that's lighter. For D&D, it's class versus race, and here it's culture versus color,
Yeah.
It's very, very fitting for the Lord of the Rings world too, where like pretty much all the culture is huge in Lord of the Rings, and those individual cultures are like very where you come from determines most of what you're doing. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So very on brand.
In the first part of this podcast, we made the point that the book sort of asks you to think about your character in relationship to like where they are in their geography, in the idea that, this is not an informational world. There's not you're not someone from, Bree may not have ever seen an elf before. Who knows, right? So like that is something at character creation. I think maybe that's why like the cultures are so important, because you really know your own pretty well, but like not maybe the others as much as you would elsewhere. Yeah.
One thing that I don't think that the system did as well, going back to that conversation we were having a little bit earlier about how L5R's character creation gives you a lot of open-ended questions that like basically build your background as part of the character creation. I feel like this one only had a few opportunities to develop what our backgrounds are based on the mechanics of the character creation itself. Like I grabbed onto, like from my calling, I got that enemy lore, like distinctive feature. And so I used like that hooked something in my brain. And I was like, oh, okay, why do they hate trolls? Okay, well then they were part of this troll squad, and from that I can know, one thing that I'm personally interested in is like subverting the, like these characters are like these cultures are good, these cultures are evil trope. So one thing that I would be interested in for my character is like seeing if her perception of trolls as all evil and needing to be destroyed is incorrect, and finding sort of a common ground there. But none of that came from the mechanic,
Right. Yeah, I do feel like we got a lot of these like broad categories of things that it's like, like messenger, and it's like, okay, so that needs to tie in somehow. But I feel like the rest of like the personality and like the story of my character was sort of left to me to like, it's like you have this pile of things, so like now you make something out of it. There wasn't a lot, the game didn't do a lot of that work for you.
I still don't know exactly why my character is here in Bree, aside from I was out traveling. I have a calling to protect people from the shadow, and somehow that meandered my way here with this group. And so it's very high level, right? We don't have the specifics of like, 5 years ago I had this altercation with so and so, and this person was there to help me with it, and now we're tied together.
Yeah. So the question is like, so obviously that leaves a lot to the players and the GM to come up with like, okay, why are we here? But on the other hand, it probably means you don't end up with a bunch of people who have come in with these very disparate stories that the GM has to like figure out how to put together. Which is, something that I think can happen in a lot of games, is that you go home, you make your character, and you're like, here's my 12 pages of backstory that don't match anybody else at the table. Whereas when you come in with nothing, then there's more room to sort of work together on that. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Whether that's for good or ill.
This game does kind of give the GM the cheat code, though, of having the patron. Like, you can always just say, well, Gandalf meets you and tells you, hey, I've got these other people who you'd like, come on a mission with us, you know?
Right. And like I said, you don't say no to Gandalf. So
yeah,
that's sort of solves that whole problem right there. As people who have played this game several times, how do you feel like the process of character creation informs what you're going to be doing in the game? Like, how does it sort of reinforce the feeling of the game, or does it?
Yeah, we thought about this a little bit. I think one thing I want to call out is the company creation, which is part of character creation. I think that the bringing your party together in like a formal big C company really enforces the importance of who you of adventure and traveling and who you're going with, right? As we were creating our characters, we kept saying like, oh wow, we're so well rounded. We've got all these different, heroic cultures being represented, and we all have different callings. Like, wow, that's really cool. And because this is very much, I think at its core, a game about fellowship and about coming together. So I think, coming up with that company stuff, your fellowship focus, where a place where you guys feel safe. And I think that's also really neat because these are opportunities where you can, if you want to, interact with canon things, which again, I think is quite a thrill for folks who love this material. The patrons, at least that you start out with, are known characters from the books, and it's likely, or it doesn't have to be, but you can choose a canonical location, as like we did with the Prancing Pony for your safe haven. And so this is a great way for these new characters to kind of interact a little bit. It doesn't have to be about these things. It's your patron is not the only thing we're going to do, but what we're going to, but it's a great way for those roads to meet. And I think that's really cool. I think that reinforces the feeling. Definitely.
Well, we talked a bit about some of the flaws of the system in a previous question, but what do you think is one of the biggest flaws?
I wonder if I don't know. And you guys can let me know what you think about this, but I think almost the setting of Eriador, it's not a flaw at all, but I want more from the setting. I really want to be able to go to Fangorn for it. I want to be able to go over the mountains. Now, of course, as we said, you can do this if you incorporate the first edition as well, because those are known things. But this game really does want you to focus in Eriador. That's the point of it. And I think that's great. But I don't know, I feel like people want to go to Mordor, and you really are not invited to go to Mordor in this book, right? Without a little bit of finagling. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. When the second edition first came out, I read a review. I forget which website it was on. It was like Polygon or Dicebreaker or something like that. And one of the things that they explicitly called out is that this system, at least from their understanding of it, is not one where you're going on epic quests and, taking the One Ring to Mordor. It's one where it's oftentimes that your character will be, helping Farmer Maggot muck out his stables. I think that was the example that they used, which at the same time, when I read that review, I'd been running this game for Steph, Jude, and a couple of our friends where we were on this epic quest doing all this stuff. And I had to think about it for a little bit. And in order to get the epic quest, I had to draw on resources from outside of the main core book. We started in Rohan, so I had to go back to the version, the first edition book, and then use Tolkien Gateway for all of the places that aren't covered in the book. So, yeah, I think that the scope of the adventures as written in the book can be a little bit limited.
Is that a product of the game itself, or is that a product of how much stuff Tolkien has written though? Is that, a question of the Legendarium is so big that at what point do you say the book would be too much if we put all of those things in there? That's and you sort of lose some of that accessibility, especially for newer people, the more stuff you put in there.
I think
that's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I bet that's exactly why they chose it.
Well, it's also ripe for expansions, right? right for
Right.
supplemental
I mean, there
materials.
is also money to be made there by like making, all of those supporting books too.
Right. But I mean, it does tell me, like, if I didn't even know the first edition existed, which I didn't until I did the research, it was like, okay, well, if this is just one small area of the world, when can I get the rest? Because I know expansions are coming and those supplements are going to be coming for this because this game's pretty cool. So like, then it's just a matter of time of waiting and when you jump into it. But the fact that first edition books are out there already and you can kind of finagle it into this system pretty easily, that kind of keeps that epicness and open worldness to it. But yeah, if you're coming in with just the core book, it is a little limiting, but that's not to say you can't start the seeds of an epic adventure.
Absolutely.
Right,
Yeah.
true.
I mean, I think you're totally right. Like you make a starting character, the scope of the adventures that they get into would be by their nature more limited, although that does kind of fly in the face of the source material because, the first time Frodo leaves the Shire, it's to take the One Ring to Rivendell and then he ends up going all the way to Mordor. So,
Right.
yeah. I mean, and I know too, talking about expansions, I think it was as part of the Kickstarter, they've already released the Rivendell expansion book. So I'm sure that there's more on the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's also one called like Ruins of the Lost Realm, which gives you just another additional map of other cities and other cool stuff. One thing I wanted to note that is really cool about this, so because just to kind of dovetail in with this idea of like, I want my character to be able to go on like bigger, more stuff. There is a really nifty mode that was recently released for this game called Strider mode, which we haven't talked about yet. And it is a means to do this as a solo game. So you don't need a lore master for this. You can do it all by yourself. And the idea is you can create your own character for this, or you could take your pre-existing character and give them their own side quest. And there's like new tables that can sort of help to answer like the questions that you might ask to a lore master or whatever. And like tables that can kind of give you like good stuff and bad stuff that happened to you along the way. But these, and it sort of it gives you some additional rules to facilitate that solo play. And so I like that option is there. I don't know if I necessarily would do it just because, I don't know, I never do anything. Bleep blurb. But it's there if you want to. But again, like, at just from a character creation standpoint, you're not gonna get that.
Yeah.
You have to go beyond.
Yeah. There's been a plethora of like solo games and sort of a push for solo games in recent years. Is something I saw like a lot in the Ennies in the last 2 years. Is like a lot of solo games because I think people are like, pandemic, I'm alone. I want a game to play. And it's been interesting to see the ones that like, because when it started out, it was a lot of just like journaling. And I've seen more and more that are like, no, let's take an actual game with actual mechanics that you can do things. And it's cool to see like some established games starting to make that an option rather than just an entire game that is a solo game.
Yeah, that's super cool.
I'd be very curious if you could take those rules for a solo game here and expand it to a group and just have a GM-less kind of experience, right?
Oh, that's a great idea.
I think that could be a lot of fun potentially.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Don't even need Jude.
Who needs Jude? Oh boy.
Oh, brother.
It is time for our favorite section. This is where we discuss what would happen if we played this game, or as we refer to it, our fanfic section.
Yes.
What kind of game would we play, and what do we think would happen? Like, what would be what is Gandalf sending us to do?
Gandalf's the X factor here, right?
Right.
Because I was like, well, why are we all together in the first place? And it's like, well,
because Gandalf told us to.
Right. I can easily see Gandalf meeting each of us individually and just being like, on this day at this moon phase, go to the prancing pony.
Yeah.
There you will meet 3 other individuals.
That's a great Sirian impression. I love that.
It's great. It's really good. Yeah, like that's the thing. Like Gandalf, like looks for like not only your like. I mean, I think like, yeah, his emphasis is not on a highborn person, for his example. His emphasis is on like the strength of one's heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
that's of course not great either.
or at least like or at least like there's something in your being that Gandalf as a patron can see and say that this person will add something to this group that they need, right? Because it's all about balance. And really at the end of the day, we're all working to fight in some way, or at least to push back against the enemies of the free people. So that is pretty broad. You can do that in lots of different ways. And so, yeah.
I think probably the best indicator is to look at our callings. Cause like, you know, obviously like for the warden, you know, so we have a warden, and I think we have a warden, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have a warden. Right? So obviously it means that what we're doing should involve protecting some people. You know, and we have a messenger. So, you know, there could be an aspect of needing to travel some distance. And I think the key also is that we have a treasure hunter. So wherever we're going, it's going to need to be like, in order to have that calling hook into all of this, there needs to be an aspect of finding something that was lost or finding a treasure or something like that. So you can kind of take the callings and use those to sort of point us in a general direction based on that.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. I
do like that a lot.
One of the things, going back to Gandalf as a patron, one of the things that I've always thought was super cool is like, so in The Hobbit, he shows up and he's just like, yeah, you know, I met Thorin's dad. He told me that there's like a treasure, and he gave me a map. Why don't you dwarves go and like find the treasure? And it's like super straightforward, very simple. Just like, hey, dwarves, I'm going to help you out. Go get your ancestral home back. When you get to the appendices of Lord of the Rings, one of the things that it says in the appendix is that Gandalf was worried that when Sauron came back, he was going to use the dragon Smaug to fight and destroy the free people. And so he was like, okay, I got to take care of this dragon. And I know these dwarves want to take their home back. I'll tell these dwarves to go get the treasure and they'll take out the dragon for me while they're doing it. So his involvement as a patron means that he doesn't even need to tell us what exactly we're doing. He could be pointing us in the direction of something way bigger and more tied into the larger meta plot. But we could just think, oh, you know, we got to go find this golden cup of, you know, whomever in this barrow. Yeah.
I love that.
Ooh.
I feel like that would be really fun in a campaign, especially like a long running campaign over time to like slowly put those pieces together. But also a lot of planning work. So
yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Cause you could make up something like some MacGuffin that is tied to some big threat that's never even mentioned in the movies or the books or anything like that. And just say, well, we took care of that threat. So that's why it was never mentioned.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was taken care of in that gap between the stuff there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things too, you know, in the Lord of the Rings, it's, you know, Rohan and Gondor fighting against Mordor at the same time. And this is mentioned, I think, in the appendices or the histories or whatever. Up in the north, in Mirkwood, the elf king Thranduil, who's up there and like the hobbits ran into in The Hobbit, like his forces are fighting Sauron's forces in the north to keep them from coming down and joining the battle as well. So it's not even mentioned at all in the Lord of the Rings, but there are battles going on all over the place that allow the heroes to be successful in their, you know, in the final battle at Mordor.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so hopefully this should be freeing to people that feel like, oh, I don't know the lore. I don't know if I really want to play that game. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't know. Like, everything is valid and everything, you know, everything can mean something. And I think it also helps you just jumpstart and just let's just get going. Like, I know Amelia said, oh, you know, you need a lot of pre-planning. Like, It can figure it out later.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, Ryan, though, to say that, like, well, you know, the reason that it was never mentioned in any of those books or anything is because, like, it was taken care of. Like, we solved it, so it didn't need to be mentioned in the books because it was already, you know, it was already done before anything came up. Like, we took care of it.
It's true. In the we talked about the Nerd of the Rings is interview with Francesco Nepatello, the person who made this game. Francesco said, in the starter box, there are pre-made characters, and two of them are like Frodo's parents, who we know canonically drown, right? And that is why Frodo over time ends up with Bilbo, right? And setting our story. He's like, you can reverse that. You can play them. Why don't you play them and save their life and see how that changes things? So I think it's also okay to mess with canon if you want to, like, you know, depending on how everyone in your party feels about it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's just an alternate history of this fantasy world, which is still fun.
You know, or you could say, you know, like, we know the only thing we know about, you know, Frodo's dad is that Frodo's parents is they drowned in a boating accident. Why were they in a boat? Were they on an adventure that Gandalf sent them on to, like, go recover something? And on the way back, the boat was attacked by orcs and they drowned, you know, like you can even paint in around the line, like paint right up to the line, you know, that's already established.
Or did they not drown at all and then they're just missing and presumed to have drowned?
Ooh.
Right?
They had to fake their deaths.
I love that.
Yeah.
Something happened and then, it's a big conspiracy now. Probably created by those trolls.
So did any of our characters know each other beforehand, or did we just get spirited away by Gandalf to the prancing pony and that was our first time meeting and we had to do some mundane thing at first that seemed innocuous, but maybe set something up down the line?
Well, I think we said that Gilly and Nob know each other because it's like, I mean, we're pretty close together and it seems reasonable that you would have come to whatever in my parents' own that I live in.
Exactly.
And so, you know, we've been friends or friendly. But I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah, because my character,
you're not the adventuring type.
Not really the adventuring type. Well, my culture is usually like just stay in Linden, stay here, and why go out? You know, in 300 years they're going to be going to a boat anyway, so you know, might as well just stick around here. But I can imagine like staying there, growing up, learning about the shadow, learning about these patterns, and then starting to go out on my own, and happenstance running into Gandalf and having this, like, you know, buddy cop sort of scenario with Gandalf. For a short period of time, and then like Gandalf's like, you know, hey, if I ever need something, can I call on you? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. And
then actually Gandalf's like, let me introduce you to the love of your life.
Right, exactly.
There's a little meet cute, situation. I like the idea of Gandalf the matchmaker.
Right.
Well, I'm very into that.
How does Drifa get there then?
I think, I mean, maybe this is maybe a little too like meta, but I think it makes sense for Drifa at least to come in and meet Laurelin as part of this party. Because we know from, you know, like the reason why Legolas and Gimli being best friends is such a big deal is because it's pretty rare. You know, it sort of flies in the face of a lot of sort of established like prejudice between those two cultures. So I think that if Drifa and Laurelin are friends prior to getting into the party, I would go the other way, where they first meet as part of this thing, and their friendship is built through the, like, maybe they have this moment where they have a connection, but their friendship and all that is built as part of the game, to build on that relationship. So it remains as sort of a rare thing, you know?
I like that.
I think one thing we always say on Athrabeth is we like to point out the importance of fan fiction, because Tolkien, you know, is great and all those things, but also there's a lot of stuff missing. from Tolkien's writings, and that's okay to talk about those things and to embrace those things and to embrace the things that are not great, right? The bad prejudices and all those things that are in that are present. We need to embrace those things, and it's okay that they exist, but it's also okay for us to recreate and to add in places where things are missing, things that are important are missing, different kinds of relationships. And so I think like that would be the kind of story I would want to do, is to like look beyond just like and I want to look for the places where we can add in those things.
Yeah.
And so I think like your example of that friendship and then possibly more would be really wonderful and would fill a great need.
I feel like that's one thing that I love about role-playing games in like, you know, like other like intellectual properties is like the ability to sort of do the fix-it fic of your own game, and to be able to say like, I wish it would have gone this way. I'm going to make it go this way. Like, I'm going to solve that problem that like there isn't representation for this thing, or that this part of the story is bad or whatever. And to be able to say like, at my table, we're going to fix that.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love that. That's so great.
Yeah.
All right. Should we get into our advancement segment that I hate the name of?
do we want to take it up a level?
Air horn sounds.
Take it up a level. Take it up a level.
In this segment, we cover what character advancement and character growth looks like in the system. So let's start with, how do characters level up mechanically in this game? And what do they change as they do that?
So at the end of each session, every player gets 3 adventure points and 3 skill points. Like, it's set per session. This is the number that you get. You accumulate these points over the course of the adventuring phase. And then when you get to the fellowship phase, which, if you remember, the game is broken up into essentially two phases. The adventuring phase, which is where you're out in the world doing your thing. And then the fellowship phase, which is where you return to a place of safety, your home base or someplace safe. And it's the downtime phase where you rest, you recover, you do undertakings, which are things like, studying maps or writing songs, things like that. And the fellowship phase is also where you can spend those points to raise your skills and to gain valor and wisdom.
Okay. And does that have like is there any narrative impact? Like there's a reason why this stuff's increasing versus this other thing? Or is it just, now that the adventure's over, we have time to reflect and now we've got extra abilities, extra skills?
Yeah, I think that's advancement is tied to the fellowship phase. So we talked about the 2 phases of this game that alternate: the adventuring phase where you're out in the world doing stuff, and then the fellowship phase, which is a more introspective phase. You're resting in a safe haven or something, and you're kind of thinking about what has just happened and telling your story. So the fellowship phase, it's sort of, in a way, I mean, it's not mechanical, I don't think, but you can kind of choose your advancements based on what you just did in your adventure.
Yeah.
And because it happens like, 2 or 3 sessions and then a fellowship phase, 2 or 3 sessions, you have, it sort of grows naturally, which I really like. It's not just like, oh, okay, I went back to school and figured this out. I was just hanging out with a bunch of rangers. And so they were kind enough to teach me some tricks with the bow and arrow. And now all of a sudden, and so now I'm going to knock up my arrow, my proficiency in arrows, or bows up. And so I think it's really beautifully done that way in the fellowship phase. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think like you said, I don't think it's strictly required, but I think it sort of guides you towards using what you just did to guide, to guide what you're increasing, and also with the valor and wisdom. We discussed this in the first section, but so valor is sort of your reputation in the world, and wisdom is the sort of knowledge that you gain through your experiences. You can kind of look and say, okay, well, in these last sessions, we saved a town and we became the heroes of this town. I'm going to increase my valor. It makes sense to do that. Or, wisdom, like, we learned some key lore, and now I have a better understanding of the history of Middle Earth. I'm going to raise my wisdom. It, done right, I think it all flows out of what you were just doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I know one of the examples is we went through a dungeon and now I know more about sailing.
That's the one I always give. I always give. It's like, I hate when games like you level up and it's like it has nothing to do with, with the, it's like, okay, I spent a lot of time in a cave and now I have the sailing skill.
But even here, right? Like I can justify it. If you're leveling up during the fellowship phase, you're like, I just spent the last like 5 weeks in a dungeon. I want to learn about something that's the exact opposite of a dungeon to kind of cleanse my palate. So I'm just going to learn about sailing during this time.
Yeah, I'm going to read a book about wide open spaces.
Exactly.
I'm going to you can justify it if you wanted to.
Exactly. So you could just buy the numbers. Oh, I want to increase my hunting just because, even though we didn't do any hunting, but maybe it'll be good down the line. Because, you're hunting while you're traveling, you're doing all this stuff. So it makes sense that you'll just pick up on things here and there.
Yeah.
I also feel like looking at these skills that like, I can't imagine that there are very many of them that like you wouldn't have reason to level up. Like, I feel like when I think about the things that you would do in a game, there aren't a lot of them that like would not be applicable.
Right, it's not hyper specific, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't think there's even a sailing skill on here.
No, there's not. I checked before I said that.
At character creation, you have yet to go through an adventuring phase in which you have to do a journey. And so I think like unless you've read the whole book, like as a player, which I don't always do, right? When I'm creating a character, I have no idea what's in store for me. And so I think those first fellowship phases those first few times where you're adding some points in to sort of make it so you can make it through a journey and it not take 20 days, right, to get a little hex on a map. I think that's I think that of course comes with experience. Makes sense, but
Well, and also, the fellowship phase has a minimum duration. It has to be at least a week that your characters are resting. It has no maximum duration. So it could even be, we returned to the Shire after our adventure. And for the next year, I trained myself on the sword because just the next time we're going out in the world, I need to be better with the sword, So depending on what the GM says too, you could even just do it that way.
And that when you think about if you're playing a company of elves, like, you can take 20 years to become a really good sailor. That is an eye blink to an elf,
that's
right?
That
Who's going to live thousands and you know what I mean? Like, so that really changes things a lot. And I feel like you could really, whilst you may not have like the points for it, you can also save points too. That's the other important thing. Like you don't have to spend them all. And so then if you do take like a big longer break, and you really want to upgrade, you can do a big one. Yeah. And I think that would be really neat to re-examine someone, or even like a company like ours that's very mixed, right? We have a human, we have a hobbit. Those are going to live a certain amount of time. We have a dwarf who's going to live a little longer, but then we have an elf. Like, what if like we come back, right? And like Amelia and I are like elderly and you and Ryan is still in the spring of her, of Laurelyn's life. Like, how will that change, the stakes? What a wonderful thing to think about. Like, that would be so interesting.
That would be cool.
I could easily see a campaign of this being like one character is an elf and then it's multi-generational for the other characters.
Yeah.
Like you play different people throughout this one elf's life and you're skipping 20, 30 years. But
I just got goosebumps.
Cool. But then the fellowship points are like, okay, I've got 3 adventure, 3 skill points to divide, but that's going to the next character.
Well, and that's actually like, so in that interview that we watched with Francesco Nepatello, one of the things that he did specifically call out is that the game is intended to be generational. And there's a mechanic that's part of advancement, so you have your normal fellowship phase. And then once a year, you have what's called the Yule Fellowship phase, which is essentially Christmas. And there are certain things that you can only do during the Yule Fellowship phase. It's meant to be like a big milestone. I would think it would be something that you would do at the end of a campaign rather than at the end of just an adventuring session. And one of the things that you do during Yule is an undertaking called Raising an Heir, where you literally spend your points to create a pool of points that you use to use to generate the next character.
That's really cool.
And like, if your character dies without having raised an heir, the book tells you, okay, we'll roll up a new character. But if you die after raising an heir, then you just seamlessly pick up as your heir character. So it's like Bilbo and Frodo. Bilbo raised Frodo as his heir, and Frodo's there for the journey after Bilbo retires.
Oh, I like that.
Oh, that's really cool.
Absolutely.
Really like that.
And that's a great example of using it like a first edition character, or even like, setting your game farther in the past and then bringing them forward. I just think that's lovely and very fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, that's so neat.
Yeah.
That would be really fun.
150 years past the start date, Frodo still hasn't taken the ring because he lost it.
Oops.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I know, I set it down somewhere.
Nobody knows where it is. Keep it secret. Keep it safe. It's a little too safe, Gandalf. I don't know where it is.
Oh.
Well, is there anything else that we want to say before we close off this? This was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
This was great. It was so fun. We've played this game a lot, but going back in and really getting into like why I just really like that your show asks us to look just beyond the numbers and like really look at like why the character sheet is set up that way and what are they thinking about and how does that actually relate to the game. I think because we've said a few times now, like the writers were so intentional with everything in this game. It's all about world building. Mm-hmm. I think like when you really focus on the character creation part of it, like it launches you directly into Tolkien's world, which is like the best thing in the whole world. It's the best. I love it. It's great. Yeah, it's such a fascinating game. I hope everyone plays it.
I really want to play it at some point.
I know we were a little critical of the character creation process being maybe a little bit too on rails or not sort of giving us the flexibility. I do want to say this is a lovely game. Like this is such like when you actually get to the playing of this game, it is such a lovely, interesting, deeply Tolkien-like game that it's wonderful. I love this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am so much wanting to play this game. These characters, I love them. And I want to see their shenanigans.
Yeah. No, like I said, when I first read through it too, it's like you can tell that it's very lovingly crafted, that it is, it comes from someone who cares very deeply about this. It's not just like, ooh, media tie-in, hooray.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of thought put into it. Yeah. So
that's very cool. Well,
definitely.
Steph and James, thank you both so much for joining us to talk about the One Ring.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome. You guys are the best.
Aw, you're the best.
No, you're the best.
I haven't gotten to talk to you two in so long because we haven't gone anywhere or done anything or gone to any conventions. Yep. It was nice to catch up.
Absolutely.
Oh, it was great.
Well, can you two remind everyone where they can find you online and what sorts of things you have going on?
Sure. So again, I've been Stephanie Midlock, and you can find me on the Athrabeth Podcast with my co-host, Jude Vase. We are on the web at podcast.athrabeth.com, and you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Athrabeth_cast, and you can find me at the North 4 on Twitter and Instagram, and Jude is Aromatic Jude. So if you want to learn any more about Tolkien, we try to break things down and make it fun and silly and like a little raunchy, and it's a lot, but it's a fun show. So we invite all of you to come and take a listen.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating podcast. I really like it.
Yeah,
thank you.
And
James, what about you?
Yeah, thanks. And I'm James Pierson. I can be found editing the Athrabeth Podcast. And if you stay tuned in October, I think we should be releasing the third and final part of our Hobbitween The One Ring actual play adventure as a bonus episode on the Athrabeth Podcast. I can be found on Twitter at jpearson, and keep an eye on that space for possibly some other RPG projects in the future.
Well, very cool. Thank you both again for sitting down with us, and thank you for everyone for tuning in.
Call to action.
Yeah, like that. First of all, I'm really glad that we got to have Stef and James on.
Yeah.
I love them. They're wonderful people. Normally, they are part of my convention experience.
Yes.
And so I've really missed them over the last couple of years. So it's been a bummer to like not see people.
Yeah, it was good to catch up with
obviously, them. We're all in that boat. But it was very nice to catch up with people that I've missed a lot. And so I'm really glad that they could take the time to do this, and like the timing is perfect with the show. And
absolutely. Yeah, I really like that this came out at the same time as the new Lord of the Rings series, The Rings of Power. I'm enjoying the show, and it's it is really interesting seeing kind of like the similarities between all the different character types that you're seeing in the show and like what you can play in the game itself.
Yeah, after having just gone through and like made characters and everything, it's very interesting, like watching the show and being like, okay, I got it. I see where you're coming from.
Like you can tell that that's a really good game system that actually did capture
that you really got the feeling.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was really cool. And then like, it's making me also want like a, whatever Gandalf and company are as playable characters, but I think that might be a little too OP.
Yeah.
So I assume that's why that's not an option. But you can make it. Give me those stats.
Yeah, for sure. I'm enjoying it because I've been watching it with the kids because it's on Friday nights, and Nate is now in middle school, and that is when I read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So like he's at about the same age that I was at. And so it's one of my favorite things about parenting generally is just like sharing the things that I love, like taking my kids to see Star Wars, like that kind of stuff. So I've been enjoying that. I think he's like not quite as like into it as I am.
That's usually the case. And you can't push them because goodness, then
the more you do, the more they're like, ugh, mom.
Stop forcing this on us, you nerd.
Right. I will say for people who have listened to this series now and really enjoyed these episodes, I do know that over on Athrabeth, they just finished recording their third segment of their Hobbit-ween episodes that they do every October. So there are episodes in their feed from the last 2 years, and then they will have one for this year as well that I know James runs the game for a group of friends. So if you want to hear the game played, you can certainly head over to the Athrabeth feed and hear some of them.
Absolutely. Oh, it's so good. And stay for the amazing like deep dives into the Lord of the Rings lore, which is just so fascinating. Like the different facets of everything that you don't get just by reading the main books or watching the series or the movies or anything like that.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those like, oh, these are people that have had like a lot of time to think about this. Because like we all have our thing, and like that's there's a thing I loved about making Garbage of the Five Rings too. It's just like I love people unapologetically being into things, and that's what they're doing over there. It's great. It's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, having said all of that, before we let you go for the week, we do have some calls to action. First up, our review bin is still pretty empty at the moment.
It's really sad.
But we would love to hear what you think about the show. We do see reviews from all countries on Apple Podcasts, so no worries about us not catching it. You can also leave reviews on Podcast Addict if you're on Android, or Podchaser for pretty much any device with a browser. You can also leave a rating on Spotify if you listen to us on Spotify. I think that's like all the places that really matter.
We do have our Facebook page, so if you wanted to leave a review on Facebook, you certainly could too.
I still don't think anybody really looks at those.
It's not my favorite place, but if you put one there, we will read it.
We will definitely read it if you put one there. Absolutely. Every review does help us out, and regardless of whether or not it helps us out algorithmically, it really makes our day whenever we come across a new one. Good. So, yeah,
it warms our hearts.
Better.
And we're in Wisconsin, and it's fall now, so we're gonna need that.
Cold.
We're gonna need that heartwarming, people.
Yeah, exactly.
Please, won't you think of the podcasters?
For one review ever.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You
for the
can
low,
warm
low
a
price.
podcaster heart.
Yep. The price of just 1 star a day.
5 stars. 5 stars.
5 stars. All 5 stars. Great. Former podcast guest on Character Creation Cast and person who is also my son, Nathan, started middle school this month and is already working on his first fundraiser because, gosh darn it, do we not fund our public schools here?
No.
His music department is raising funds to buy new instruments. They want to give students scholarships for music summer camps, which I think is really cool. Mm-hmm. They would like to fund some field trips this year and possibly even get t-shirts for everybody. Mm-hmm. They are selling some cookie dough, Christmas wrapping paper, weird random Christmas decor, and honestly, all kinds of other random stuff that you would find in a middle school fundraiser. Look, like we've all been there.
Yeah.
The sale is going on through September 26th. You can shop online and have it shipped to you if you want. And I made him a little bit.ly link with his gamer tag. So you can find Nate's fundraiser if you would like to support his weird wrapping paper cookie sale at bit.ly/badgerfish7.
There you go. In other news, I just finished editing a couple of episodes of a new bonus actual play that is coming to the One Shot Network Secret Archive sometime very soon. It might actually already be there. It's not there as of the time of this recording. But James D'Amato let me edit these episodes and throw some beautiful synth music into the actual play portion of the show. That choice of music will make sense once you know what the show is all about, but I don't know exactly what details James is throwing out there, so I'm being as vague as possible right now.
Super secret podcast time.
Yeah, but if you are a fan of Campaign Skyjacks, this does have a very similar energy to it, and my sides were splitting while editing this. I was just, I lost it at so many portions, so it's so good. But definitely keep an eye out for that. If you do have an extra $5 to spare for the One Shot Network Patreon at patreon.com/oneshotpodcast, you'll get all of these episodes. And if you like what you hear, please tell James and company that you liked it, because then I can potentially, edit more episodes in the future.
You did like way too much equivocating on that. Everyone, if you listen to the episodes and you like what you hear, please tell James so that he can hire Ryan again. And Ryan can do more of a great job and he can get paid money to do things that are fun for him.
Exactly. And then I can, support my family and
Christmas is coming up.
It's nice. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you to everybody that does listen. And, thank you for telling James that you liked it.
Other ways that you can help us out. We are in need of some more listeners to help out if you're able to by backing us on Patreon. Coming soon to our side quest patron levels and above, or it might be in the feed already by the time this episode actually comes out, will be a fun actual play that Ryan and I did of the game Summer Break. There will also be early release episodes with just the episode content whenever those are edited. As soon as Ryan gets them done, he throws them in there. It's great. You also get bonus outtakes for every series at all of the levels, including the $1 level, and maybe even special patron-only events at certain times throughout the year at certain levels. So please absolutely check out the Patreon at patreon.com/charactercreationcast if you have the ability to spare a little bit towards helping us afford making this show for all of you. One of the additional perks, though, is we will thank you personally right here in our calls to action. And we'd love to add more names to this list because you're all amazing, and we would really love the opportunity to just say all of your names.
Absolutely.
We will start, as always. Lieutenant, thank you so much.
David, a.k.a. Tigranosaurus, thanks.
Thank you so much to you, Eric Bonts.
Matt Newton, you rock. Thank you.
Shadim Cabal, you also rock. Thank you.
Many thanks to Daryl Holiday II.
The Shyest Barbarian, we appreciate your support and on all of your interaction on our Discord, honestly. You are like one of the most active people in there. So much fun to talk. We love talking to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Benjamin Sweeney, I'm going to say you also rock. Thank you.
We appreciate your support, Lurkin McGinnis. Thank you.
Rob Fletcher, thanks.
And thank you to you, Kevin Brown.
And thank you to all of our future patrons. We wouldn't be able to make this show as easily without your assistance, and we truly appreciate your generosity.
We absolutely do. We have so much more cool stuff that we want to do with this show, so I'm looking forward to everything that we can do with all of your support.
Absolutely.
That is all we have for today's episode. Next week, we have the week off. Maybe eventually someday, we won't have a week off. Wouldn't that be fun? But we will be back in October with a delightfully spooky game that I'm very excited for. Until then, stay safe, everyone. Drink some water, relax your shoulders, take some deep breaths, and keep making those amazing people. We'll see you next time.
Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts, this show, and even our press kit. Character Creation Cast can also be found on Twitter at CreationCast or on our Discord server at discord.charactercreationcast.com. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter at Lord Neptune or online at lordneptune.com. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permissions from the podcast they originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero, remixed by Steve Combs, and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems used in today's guest can also be found in the show notes. If you'd like to support our show, find us on Patreon. Get access to bonus episodes, extra outtakes, and much more at patreon.com/charactercreationcast. Thanks for joining us. And remember, we find the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We'll see you next time.
Now we gotta read some show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Character Creation Cast is hosted by the One Shot Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, visit oneshotpodcast.com, where you will find other great shows like Skyjack's Courier's Call.
An all-ages fantasy actual play podcast set in the world of Sphere. Skyjack's Courier's Call follows 3 teens as they set out as new apprentices aboard an airship with the Swiftwell Courier Service, bringing mail and adventure across the world. Featuring Drew Marziewski, Palomi Pratap, Aaron Kitano-Sayez, and Ali Grauer, and using the Cortex Prime system. This show is perfect for anyone just getting started in listening to actual plays, or veterans of the tabletop genre alike. Join clever but anxious Kieran, bold, fast-talking Cece, and loyal, strong June aboard the Red Audron ship as they sort and deliver mail, encounter powerful magic, and learn the proper skills of an eriner along the way. Right wrongs, do mercies, and take flight.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
All right.
Waveforms are waving.
Mm-hmm.
Looks good.
All right. Perfect.
Steph, do you want to go over the ones that are in the book?
No, you go
Okay.
over the ones. I'm scrolling to them.
Yeah.
I'm scrolling.
So-
I'm sorry.
I had a child intrusion.
It's okay. They want to come too.
I know.
Come on the adventure.
All right. We can stop our devices that are recording these things.
Okay, I'm gonna press stop.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Got it.
I think I was a little too late in releasing my click button.
You messed it up. You ruined the whole thing.
It's fine. I'll fix it in
Everything's
post.
ruined forever. Forget it. We quit the podcast.
No, I have failed my mission. There we go.
Yay, we did it.
Yay, we can
Yay, we did it!
stop
That was so
recording.
fun.
That was so cool.
Guys, we made a thing. This was the best. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh,
No?
should we stop the recording now? Yes.
Okay.
Okay.